Well, as you know, the European Union has no direct competence in culture. The treaties are clear. We are supposed to support member states in the promotion of their cultures. There is no European culture as such. There are European cultures. But nonetheless, as we have a DG for culture and as we have programs that concern culture in member states, and in particular we have Erasmus and Erasmus Mundus, despite ourselves and, contrary perhaps to the projects of our member states, the European Union is doing culture for ages now. DG Culture has produced culture inevitably, and in the last decade or so, even other institutions of the European Union, the Council and the Parliament, repeatedly developed an idea for a true use of culture in the external actions. There is Council conclusions, there is resolutions of the European Parliament on this, there are Council debates. Last but not least, the preparatory action from the European Parliament. This is a study on exactly how to develop an external policy on culture. And most importantly, I think, the document produced by the Council under the Italian presidency, not because I'm Italian, simply because the time was ripe for this, the work plan for culture, for culture adopted in 2014, explicitly provides for a notion on culture in the external relations. All this fits perfectly with the arrival of Mrs. Mogherini at the EAS, because Mrs. Mogherini put culture among her priorities. She developed this strategy furthermore. It is because of her that we today have a communication, and it is through the implementing of this communication that we are going to have at last a true European strategy in culture. But let me explain briefly now what is this strategy and what is the change, the profound change we see in this new notion of cultural diplomacy compared to the traditional cultural diplomacy that all our member states usually do with their own embassies and institutes. And also our delegations, actually, because, again, EU delegations around the world have been developing a European cultural diplomacy. Traditional cultural diplomacy is showcasing. You present, you promote your cultures. The EU delegations used to do this, presenting examples of European culture, film festivals, exhibitions, and so on. What we want to add to this traditional cultural diplomacy is a different element of better involvement and more profound cooperation with locals, with local cultural organizations. Because too often in our cultural action, we realized we only reach the establishment. We don't reach real people. And in some cases, not only this was a limit, but the simple fact that the European Union wanted to engage in culture with the cultural world of many regions and countries of the world was seen as suspicious. Many were worried, again patronizing, imposing our view of culture, our culture. Let's not forget that, the majority of the developing world was in the past European colonies. And so this, well, misconception or suspicion had to be faced in some way. We therefore imagined this, what we call this people-to-people cultural diplomacy, that is a common ground. We want to engage with real cultural operators and not ourselves simply as delegation, as officials. We want the cultural world from Europe to engage in the cultural world of developing countries, of our partners, and do co-creation, launch partnerships, develop exchanges. More concretely, we want cultural operators from other countries come to Europe and learn, and our cultural operators go to the outside world and learn from each other on a peer-to-peer basis. We are not there to teach, we are there to learn. This is our slogan. In this perspective, the communication is structured in 3 work streams, we call them. The first is culture and development. And this is the most important work stream. Culture is an engine for growth. Culture can be an economic resource. Think of cultural heritage. Cultural heritage attracts tourism. There are now in the world models of cultural heritage hubs where ONGs are developing around a cultural site activities, industrial activities, creative industries hubs, textile, fashion, design, all around a cultural site. This is just one example. As we intend culture in a broader sense here, and not just culture as itself, also education and training are part of our strategy. And when you organize exchanges of students like Erasmus, then you do training, but you also do cultural diplomacy. This is the second work stream of our communication, what we call intercultural dialogue. You were discussing a few minutes ago about interreligious dialogue in a way. Well, the integration of, in particular, Muslim communities, dialogue between different religious communities. We are also engaging this with our communication, and we are already launching actions on this. Again, exchanges are the way. We are imagining now exchanges of scholars, religious scholars, from partner countries to Europe and vice versa. Intercultural dialogue is also a powerful instrument for pacification after conflicts and for the prevention of conflicts. Think of the Balkans and think now of the North Mediterranean, the MENA countries as we call them. The third work stream is cultural heritage, and this I have already described it to you. Cultural heritage also as a tool for consolidation of societies. When a community is aware of the cultural heritage that is, of which they are the custody, then they have ownership of this. They can imagine how to make of it a resource. Final element of this very brief description of our strategy is, well, I think the core notion of the whole policy. How to implement this, how to carry out this strategy. Delegations will have a crucial role because we expect from them, and we are already receiving from them, ideas, inputs, examples of what we can do, information on what we are not doing and we could do. But this kind of action will be really fully fledged when cultural institutes, national cultural institutes, will be involved in this activity. We want cultural institutes to work with us, and this will create synergies, economies of scale. This will allow cultural institutes, national cultural institutes, to wage a more coherent policy and avoid overlapping of activities done by other cultural institutes. And this will allow us to give a European added value to this cultural diplomacy waged together by member states and the European Union. We very much count on this, and this is the core notion of our cultural diplomacy, exactly for what I told you at the beginning. The treaty gives us very strict rules and limits about our action. There would be a lot of many different things to say, but I leave this to your questions, and I leave the floor to Professor Higgett. Thank you.